On that day in 1977, the routine of American suburbia was shattered by the realization that behind a facade of prosperity lay a shadow that no one wanted to notice. Christopher John Boyce, a young man with an open gaze and a passion for the ancient art of falconry, was in the eyes of those around him the embodiment of middle-class success. His job at the TRW Corporation, which fulfilled orders for the Central Intelligence Agency, seemed a logical career progression for the son of a former Federal Bureau of Investigation employee. However, according to declassified data from the Committee for State Security, it was this flawless biography that became the ideal canvas for applying a spy mask. The process of his ideological maturation did not begin in the offices of handlers, but in the depths of his own disappointment with the policies of the United States of America at that time. In secret dossiers, he appeared under the call sign Falcon, and his story became a classic example of how ideological conviction enters into an irreconcilable conflict with the closest human attachments. His path into the ranks of the agency began with a deep analysis of his personality by specialists from the Soviet Union. Christopher Boyce was recognized as an ideal candidate because of his ability to blend in with his surroundings while remaining unremarkable in the best sense of the word. During the preparation process, which took place under conditions of the strictest secrecy, special attention was paid to psychological stability. One of the key exercises he mastered was the method of cognitive separation of realities. The instructor required him to keep 2 diaries simultaneously, one every day, describing the small concerns of an American Philistine, and the second, an analytical report on the secret documents he had viewed. The goal was to teach the brain to switch between personalities in a fraction of a second, so that even during a sudden awakening or in a state of alcohol intoxication, the agent would not reveal his true essence. The second important exercise concerned the technique of visual scanning when searching for dead drop locations. Boyce was taught to find natural anomalies in the urban environment, a crack in a brickwork that hasn't changed for years, or a void under the roots of an old oak tree in a park. He was told that a dead drop is not just a hole in a wall, but a sacred place of communication that should be invisible to a random passerby and easily accessible to a professional. After the completion of the preparation phase, the phase of active infiltration and the creation of a deep cover legend within the defense industrial complex of the United States of America began. Christopher's life in California was subject to an iron rule: camouflage must be active. To strengthen his position in the local community, he chose 3 elements of everyday life that made his figure absolutely transparent to suspicion. Firstly, he became an active participant in the local Gardeners Club, where every second Saturday of the month he discussed rose varieties and pest control methods. This gave him a legal reason to be outdoors often and study the landscape of the city. Secondly, he regularly visited the same dentist, maintaining long conversations with him about golf and taxes, which created the image of a person planning his life for decades to come in this particular place. Thirdly, Boyce took on the role of a volunteer at the local college library, which allowed him to spend time among books and archives without raising questions about the reasons for his constant craving for information. He was surrounded by people who saw him as a kind neighbor, a loving son, and a reliable friend, unaware that every gesture he made was part of a carefully thought-out scenario. However, behind the closed doors of the house, the tension reached its climax. One evening, when the sun had already hidden behind the horizon and the house smelled of home-cooked dinner, a dialogue took place between Christopher and his close person that became a harbinger of the future catastrophe. The interlocutor asked him why he had seemed so detached lately, as if his thoughts were thousands of miles away. Christopher, looking out the window at his falcons, replied that work at the TRW Corporation was exhausting him physically, but in fact, he just took the future of their country too seriously. His partner gently countered, saying that no future is worth losing touch with the present, and asked if he loved their life together as much as before. At that moment, Boyce felt 2 tectonic plates collide inside him: sincere tenderness for the person who was nearby, and cold duty to the idea for which he betrayed his country. He forced a smile and uttered a phrase that everything he did for the sake of their common peace and security, although deep down he knew that this lie would someday turn their world to ashes. The methods of collecting and transmitting information that Falcon used required filigree precision and the absence of the right to make a mistake. One of the most significant operations began on a rainy Tuesday. Preparation took more than 12 hours. First, Christopher extracted negatives with the specifications of the pinhole communications satellites from a sealed safe in the encryption department. Using a miniature camera, he transferred the images to microfilm, which was then packed into a waterproof capsule no larger than a grain of rice. Entering the route resembled a complex dance. To get rid of possible tails from the counterintelligence department or the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Boyce changed 3 buses, twice entered large shopping centers with many exits, and spent about 40 minutes looking at storefronts in an antique shop, using the reflection in the glass to monitor the street. Convinced of the cleanliness, he headed to the pre-selected place. The dead drop was located in Washington Park, at the base of an old, long out-of-order telephone booth under a loose floor panel. With a quick, practiced movement, he placed the capsule there and left a barely noticeable chalk mark on the nearest lamppost. 2 hours later, a so-called snap contact took place with a handler diplomat from the embassy of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. They met on a busy railway station platform. Passing each other, the handler quietly uttered a password regarding the weather in northern latitudes, to which Boyce replied with a prearranged phrase that spring is 2 weeks late this year. A short exchange of glances and a light touch of the shoulders confirmed that the signal about the placement was received. Information was transferred, but every such success only brought the moment of inevitable discovery closer. The collapse came suddenly. Investigators later established that the cause of the failure was not the error of Boyce himself, but the carelessness of his courier, Andrew Dalton Lee, who attracted the attention of the police in Mexico City. When news of his partner's arrest reached Christopher, he realized that the invisible web he had been weaving for so many years began to tear rapidly. An alarm signal was received through an agreed communication channel, and he faced a final, irreversible choice. He spent the entire evening in a painful internal monologue, looking at his sleeping family members. He realized that if he stayed, he would face life imprisonment in a federal prison, and if he left, he would forever become a traitor to them, a ghost whose name people would be afraid to pronounce aloud. Ideological duty required continuing the struggle from abroad, but human attachment cried out that he could not leave them to be torn apart by public opinion and interrogations of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Ultimately, professional deformation and the instinct of self-preservation won. He chose flight. The evacuation route was laid through several states. First, there was an overnight bus to Philadelphia, where he waited a day in a cheap motel under an assumed name. This was followed by a risky flight to Mexico City using forged documents. In the capital of Mexico, he was supposed to meet with representatives of the Committee for State Security, who organized his transfer to Cuba, and only after a long wait in Havana was he able to board a flight to Moscow. Every kilometer of this journey distanced him from the life he knew and turned him into a man without a country. The psychological price paid by the innocent victims of this spy drama was colossal. His father was forced to resign, crushed by the shame brought by his son. His wife and children were left in a vacuum of hatred and suspicion, trying to realize how a person they considered a pillar could lead a double life. After long years spent in prison after his eventual capture, Christopher John Boyce became a symbol of how easily fates are broken in the millstone of geopolitical confrontation. His story left behind only bitterness and destruction. The question that remained unanswered in this case is what actually drove him in those decisive minutes of evacuation. Was it loyalty to distant ideals that he himself did not fully understand? Or was it a cold duty to a service that ultimately could not protect him? Perhaps in the depths of his soul, he himself did not know the answer, having turned into a tool in the hands of history, which, after use, was thrown into the trash heap of forgotten names. Did ideology win? Or did he simply become a victim of his own pride, believing that he could play God without being responsible for those he loved? This question will forever remain in the shadow of his falcon wings, reminding us that in the world of shadows and betrayal, the only real value remains only those bonds that we are ready to protect at the cost of our own lives, and not destroy for the sake of the ghostly goals of great powers.